In the middle of one of the massive heat waves last summer, in July of 2021, which we know now is the world's hottest month ever on record, my friend Tom called me up jokingly and said, as Martin previewed in his welcome, "So how's the coldest summer of the rest of your life going?" And at the time, I was sweaty and uncomfortable and desperately trying to figure out how to keep my then 3-month-old baby cool when the place we were staying had no air conditioning. And I was really sleep deprived, 3-month-old baby, and so I laughed at the joke without getting it. I thought he was being sarcastic because surely this was the hottest summer of my life, not the coldest summer of the rest of my life. But then what he said sunk in a little bit more, and I realized it was a gallows humor joke, not sarcasm. No human person would have called that heat wave, that month, cold, but Tom was right. Everything we know about climate change tells us that bad as this past summer felt, awful as the heat waves and wildfires and droughts that the world over were experiencing this past summer, this summer that included the hottest month ever on record in 142 years of keeping records, is likely to be the coldest summer of the rest of our lives. It's a general trend, of course. We don't know exactly the specifics, but that's the gist, as climate scientists tell us. And once I got that the joke was a gallows humor joke, not sarcasm, my laugh went from like, to, and I'm, just knowing my own patterns, I probably made the like Debbie Downer noise. I am part of a generation, writes organizer, facilitator, and writer Yotam Marom. I am part of a generation that feels constantly that even the most mundane moments that the world is ending. He says, we have been told so many times that we have an extremely brief window to turn things around. And even then, it's already too late in so many ways. I feel swallowed by despair, he says, and I know I'm not alone. Despair isn't a reasonable reaction to the world we live in, Yotam writes. I feel it every day as I watch my 5-year-old daughter fall in love with parts of this world that will disappear during her lifetime. When she gives her pocket change to an old man on the street who is cold and hungry in a world that will almost certainly become colder and hungrier before it becomes anything else. He says, that despair is a reasonable reaction as I read the never-ending onslaught of news articles on everything from rising white nationalism to melting glaciers. Anyone else out there feeling despair? Zoom congregation, how are you guys doing? Type in the chat if you're feeling despair. Anyone else out there feeling like the world might be ending? Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes the massive challenges that are facing the world make us feel like this. And sometimes it's simply the challenges we face in our own lives. Health challenges of our own or our loved ones, loss of someone important in our lives, loss of a job or of a relationship, or some kind of illusion we cling to. Despair arrives for many reasons. And I know that I certainly feel this despair. If I'm honest, the feeling is so acute that when I look at the state of the world head on, I nearly always avert my gaze shortly thereafter. I'm afraid that if I spend too much time immersed in the reality of all the problems facing humanity and life on Earth, I will lose my ability to keep treading water. I will lose my ability to hold my breath for brief stints beneath the waves. I fear that I will slip beneath the surface of this ocean of despair and not be able to kick my way back up. But even when I have found a way of sitting dry above the waves on whatever boat of comfort or oblivion I can build in this storm. The spray of the sea still seems to find me, and it dampens my hair, and it fills my senses with its scent. And I am reminded that the problems are massive and encompassing, and at least some of them are probably unfixable. I cannot escape that truth. Koala bears are functionally extinct, the news tells us. And coral is dying, and apparently a massive yellow striped spider as big as the palm of your hand could soon invade the entire East Coast by its hatchlings parachuting in on their little webs from Georgia. Georgia gives us many good things. These spiders are not from Georgia either, but they will come to us from Georgia. And after hearing about these spiders, have you guys heard about these spiders? The Jojo? Starts with a J kind of spider. After hearing about these spiders, a friend of mine who knows that I'm a pastor asked me this week, so which biblical plague is it that's happening right now? And I was like, I'm a UU, I don't know. I don't know as well as I should. I don't think that there's a plague of spiders. Does anyone know if there's a plague of spiders somewhere in Scripture? I don't think so. I think we've got frogs, but no spiders, so. Yeah, locusts. Frogs is my favorite because frogs? But locusts is closer. So it can feel like the world is ending. It feels like the world is ending sometimes. But we are not the first people to feel this way, right? The arrival of European colonists to what we now call the Americas must have felt like the world was ending to the people who were native here. The Holocaust must have felt like the world was ending to many Jews in Europe. Slavers kidnapping millions of people from Africa must have felt like the world ending. Gay men at the height of the AIDS crisis in the United States, the people of Hiroshima, the people of Easter Island and Pompeii, and everyone whose home has been bombed in a war must have at some point felt like the world was ending. And for many of them, the world did end. Their world ended. Certainly the world as they knew it. And I'm sure that many of them found themselves sinking beneath those waves of despair in their time. I'm sure many did. But my friends, others found a way to keep their heads above water. People have found this path before. Viktor Frankl, a psychotherapist and the author of Man's Search for Meaning, draws on his own experience in a concentration camp when he writes, "There is nothing in the world, I venture to say, that would so effectively help one survive even the worst conditions as the knowledge that there is meaning in one's life. There is meaning in one's life." Staying connected to the meaning in our lives, grounding ourselves in the reasons to keep living, the why of why we are working for a better world, whether that why is a loved one or some positive vision for the future, or whether it's God. Staying connected to the meaning will help us survive. It helps to keep our faces above the water. The people who did this were the ones who were likely to survive the concentration camps, is what Viktor Frankl writes. He says, everything can be taken from a person, but one thing. The last of the human freedoms, which is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way, to take agency in whatever way you can. Staying connected to meaning helps us survive in the ocean of despair. But Yotam Maram goes on to say, I know that despair is my vanity talking. Despair is vanity. He writes, it is an indulgence in the illusion that what is here and now is inevitable, that the future is written and that we can see how it will unfold. Despair isn't about reality. It's not about the world. It's not even ultimately about the people that we care about. That's not why we feel despair. We feel despair because of our own hearts. As George Lakey said, he said, "I can let the newspapers tell me how my life will go, or I can decide for myself." Marome writes, "It is the act of allowing our very real sadness and fear to limit our sense of what's possible, about finding safety and comfort in that darkness, about avoiding heartbreak." That's what despair is about. He goes on to say, "When we don't believe we can win, we instead reach for the comfort of being surrounded by people who think and talk and look like us, the thrill of being part of the in-group, the small pleasures of being right and being pure." But despair is a self-fulfilling prophecy, he says. It blocks us from taking agency. And that makes it all the more likely that our worst fears will come to pass. As Rebecca Solnit writes in Hope in the Dark, "People have always been good at imagining the end of the world. It's much easier to picture than the strange, sidelong paths of change in a world without end." Despair can be about our own vanity. We can let our terrified pride believe that the future is written already and that future brings no beauty. Despair can shut us down. It can make our lives more small. But what's feeling most important to me today is not that being connected to meaning just helps us keep our heads above water, but that it makes our lives more rich while we have them. Our lives can be better. The world is better when we act like we can make a difference, when we act like our actions have meaning, when we act like we will win. Because movements that believe are far more powerful than movements that don't, says Moram. There is also just the simple, humble, profound task of being authentically alive on this planet in a time of collapse. Here, too, there is action, he says, because there is more life in the taking of agency than in the watching it flutter past us. There is more life in being connected to meaning. There is more life in taking of agency than watching it pass us by. There is a story often told in many ways that's originally adapted from The Star Thrower by Lauren Isley that goes something like this. One day, a woman was walking along the beach, and she noticed a child hurriedly picking up and throwing things into the ocean. And so she approached the child and she said, "Hello, little one, what are you doing?" And the child replied, "I'm throwing starfish back in the ocean. The surf is up and the tide is going out, and if I don't throw them back, they'll die." The woman laughed to herself and said, "Don't you realize that there are miles and miles of beach and hundreds, at least, maybe thousands of starfish? You can't make any difference." And the child listened politely and then bent down, picked up another starfish, and flung it out into the surf. And they turned and smiled at the woman and said, "I made a difference to that one." And as the story goes, the woman stood there for a moment, and then she bent down and she picked up a starfish and flung it out as far as she could. Every person that we organize, every campaign won, every fraction of a degree of global warming prevented, everything we can do to make the world even slightly better will save lives. It will make a difference to someone, even if they never know that it was us who made that difference. My child's 11 months old now. And on our daily walks through our neighborhood in West Philly, since he was born and he couldn't see what was going on, we've pointed out the wiggling leaves of the sycamore trees that line many of the streets in our neighborhood. He loves those leaves. He loves those big elephant leg trunks of those trees. And we know that many of the sycamores are infected with a disease that will kill them in West Philly at some point, across much of America. Every day I watch my child fall in love with a world that will not survive his lifetime. Lawyer and activist Colette Pichon Battle is a woman who grew up in New Orleans. And she talks on an interview that she did with Krista Tippett on Being recently about the storms, the hurricanes of her childhood, about how each of us knows the storms where we grew up. I grew up in Boston, so that was snowstorms mostly. Those are the storms I know. She knew the hurricanes in Louisiana, and they were parties for her family. When a hurricane was coming, you knew that you were going to lose power, that you were going to lose any food in your freezer or fridge, so all the aunties came over and cooked and you got out your grill because that was the only way you were going to be able to cook. All of your cousins came over and you had a party and you knew how to get through that storm. Until Hurricane Katrina came and her neighborhood was buried under 12 feet of water, even her family's ancestral home that was up on high ground. She's since become a climate activist, might be one of the things you could call her. And what she knows now is that climate change, potentially the permanent loss of her entire neighborhood, the end of her world, is coming. It's going to happen no matter what. Even if we are successful at making as much change as possible, we are going to lose so much. She says, what do we have to lose? We are going to lose everything. But my last name is Battle. She says, so I'm supposed to fight with tools, but tools that will build people up, not tools that will tear people down. And those tools are the things you learn in Sunday school: love and patience and care. We are going to lose everything, but my last name is Battle, and so I fight to build people up. This challenge requires us to recognize a power greater than ourselves, she says, and some of us might identify that as God. Some of us might just say that that's community. This challenge requires us to recognize a power greater than ourselves and a life longer than the ones that we live. It requires us to believe in the things that we sometimes have the privilege of not seeing. My friends, it is a gift to be in the beautiful blue boat above the ocean of despair with you all, when we can stay there. And when one of us slips in and treads water, it is a gift to be together when we pull each other back out. Because wherever human beings are, at least we have a chance, James Baldwin reminds us. Wherever human beings are, we have a chance. Because we're not only disasters, he says, we're also miracles. My friends, may we keep falling in love with the world, even if it disappears. May we stay grounded in our meaning. May we keep making choices that make the world better, because it makes our lives better. The future is still unwritten, and we are miracles. May it be so, and amen.
Hi, I'm Reverend Hannah Capaldi.
And I'm Reverend Abbey Tennis. We are the ministers at the First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia, where our mission is to awaken love and justice in our lives and in the world.
We're so grateful that you watched, and we hope that the sermon connected with your soul.
We also want to invite you to join us for a live worship service every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. You can always find the link to that service on our website at www.philauu.org. In these services, you'll hear words like you've just heard, and you also get a chance to greet one another, pray together, sing together, and we even hold a virtual coffee hour after services to get a chance to greet some new and old friends.
If you want to support the mission of this community and you feel moved to give, you can do so by going to the website that Reverend Abbey just mentioned. You can find that link below, or you can text 215-709-5095 and follow the prompts to give.
If someone in your life needs to hear these words today, we encourage you to share this video. And again, thank you so much for watching.
We hope to see you soon.